And when it comes to the economy, part of what happens is that the globalization that, you actually had a consensus between Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and certainly elements of my administration. We wanted to get the Trans-Pacific Partnership done, for example, TPP. The consensus around things like free trade or didn't fully address the fact that although net the whole world was doing better because of globalization and the internet and global supply chains, there were folks whose factories were being closed and suddenly found themselves to be redundant workers. And you suddenly had a winner-take-all economy where back in 1960, maybe the CEO makes 10 times more than the guy on the assembly line. Now suddenly it's 200 times or 300 times. And the capacity of nation states to regulate global capital so that at least they have some control where they say, you know what, let's speed things up, slow things down, let's ease the transition for communities that are being hurt by whether it's automation or foreign competition. That becomes harder to do because everybody's just worrying about what their quarterly reports are going to look like on Wall Street. So now that creates frustrations and contradictions. And I think that I think a legitimate critique of that consensus, of which, I consider myself to be a part of and still believe in, is that we did not adapt quickly enough to the fact that there were people being left behind and that frustrations were going to flare up and that all these changes that were happening really quick and you had to address them and speak to them. And in those environments, you then start getting a different kind of politics. You start getting politics that's based on that person's not like me, and it must be their fault. And you start getting a politics based on a nationalism that's not pride in country, but hatred for somebody on the other side of the border. And you start getting the kind of politics that does not allow for compromise because it's based on passions and emotions.
It's
and
identity politics.
Identities and which is why, by the way, when I hear people say they don't like identity politics, they don't like, I think it's important to remember that identity politics doesn't just apply when it's black people or gay people or women.
No.
The folks who really originated identity politics were the folks who said, three-fifths clause and all that stuff. That was identity politics. That's still out there. Maybe that was a little too controversial for Houston, but
no, but
Jim Crow was identity politics. That's where it started. So part of what's happened is that when people feel their status is being jostled and threatened, they react. And what I would agree with is that the Washington consensus, whatever you want to call it, got a little too comfortable with, they're looking at GDP numbers and they're looking at, the internet, and everything's looking pretty great. And then particularly after the Cold War, Jim, after what you guys engineered, you have this period of great smugness on the part of America and American elites thinking, we got this all figured out. Remember, there were books coming out, it's the end of history. And
the end of history. Francis Fukuyama.
It came back to bite us. So, I don't know, that was kind of a long lecture there. I'm sorry. That's good. We're just trying to have a after dinner conversation. I should have thrown a joke in there or something.
No.